In this video, I'll show you how to make a rough draft or name for your manga chapter, with or without a script. One of the earliest steps in the process is taking your idea and parceling it into a story that can then be illustrated and brought to life. It's important to give it a frame and structure, as a rambling stream of consciousness is pretty boring and really hard to get into. Even slice of life or vibing manga has a structure, even if it doesn't feel like it. So if I'm going without a script, I take my trusty notebook, divide the pages into 4. Each section represents ki, sho, ten, and ketsu, respectively. I use this process for chapters, books, and for koma. The principle is the same. Part 1 is going to be the intro. This is your setup, where you introduce the characters and the settings. All the ideas you have for that, put in this section. And we're just taking notes at this point. Part 2 is develop, where you expand on the information in the intro. Don't change anything, but tell us more. Reel is in. All those ideas, put in this section. Part 3 is the recontextualization or the twist, an unexpected turn that changes how your reader sees part 1 and 2. It's a twist that changes how you see the information you've been given so far. Sometimes it's easier to do this part first and then go back and do the setup. But again, we're just in the idea stages, so here we go. Part 4 is reconciling parts 2 and 3. Wrap up the story and show the aftermath of the twist. What happened because of it. I take my outline notes and divide them up into each section. They won't always be the same size. Develop will probably be the most crammed with all the ideas you want or need to share. Part 3, as I said, is where the understanding of part 1 and 2 changes, but it can also be the chapter climax. Once this is all organized, the ideas themselves will be divided into sections representing the pages. I generally use 20 pages, so I'll divide this into 10 or 20. I find it's generally better to work in spreads. Although most manga is digital these days, you can have a surprise in a page turn, you can have a really impactful spread, and if you work in single pages, it's not quite the same. So setting out your notes this way will make it much easier to decide where to do a page turn or a dramatic spread, and work out the pacing of your story. Okay, pacing. This one takes a little practice and a little nuance, but is fun to play with. Not only can you control the speed of your story, but the building of the emotion, the tension, and the payoff. This only works if the sense of time is clear and easy to follow. Scene changes, time spent in a particular moment, and flashbacks need to be portrayed in a certain way as they don't confuse your reader and your reader knows what's going on. The way a chapter is paced will affect how your reader experiences it. Are they being pushed through the story or slowly guided? Page turn can be used for a reveal, especially in horror, like a tense moment where I don't want to turn the page, and then you turn the page and there's a scare or a surprise. Large images can be impactful. Detail can slow the reader down. A lot of text can be something they have to slog through. Sometimes lots of speech speeds things up, but if there's too much, it can stop them reading entirely. If I turn a page, I think I did this in Tokyo Ghoul, where I turn a page and it was literally a wall of text, and I didn't care enough to read it, so I just turned the page. But as the creator, you strive to have control over that, but I can't do text walls. As a visual person, I like to put that impact and information in the art. In this chapter of Scatheless, I wanted to portray how long it takes to ride a bike from Dublin out to the coast in Worth, where our story was set. And it's about an hour, so I didn't want it to be like a quick page turn, like, oh, she's already there. So I went onto Google and digitally took the drive myself. I could see things along the way and added those into the story. So it's a few pages of silent, which can slow things down a little bit and show different things on the journey, but I wanted it to feel slow so that it would feel like she traveled a long way. If I didn't want to make that point and the journey didn't matter at all, then a page turn or a scene change would be perfectly fine. But I wanted to show how far she traveled to find the information she was looking for. Once you start having a feel for how your story is going to unfurl, it can be fun to play with what's known as a gaming interest curve. The TLDR is building intensity for your audience and then giving them relief. Only building intensity is exhausting, and unless you're doing a vibing manga, no intensity can be really boring. Vibing manga, you're probably not going to use an interest curve. This will be more for, seriously, dude? Come on, let's go put you outside. You're probably not going to use an interest curve for a vibing manga. You could try it. You're definitely going to want to use it for action. Let's look at the curve. We start at A, and it's typically followed by a hook at the very beginning to grab your attention, which takes us to B, followed by a drop and a slow build to C, a slight exhale to D as the sustained action builds, and falls slightly to F, but is still higher than when we started, and similar to the tension of C. Then things explode into the climax, and we drop off to H and exit still a little higher higher than we came in at A. And just like Kisho Tenketsu, you can use this thing like a fractal over and over in different sections. It can be in different moments, scenes, the overall story. You can use it back to back. It's up to you. It's fun to play with. If I was to drop this into Kisho Tenketsu, I would make G the twist, or 10, H the resolution, or ketsu, then see how key and show work with the rest. Probably A and B as key. The start is important for grabbing the reader, especially the first page. You have about 5 pages to set up the story and grab your reader with the basic info. So I'd think of C, D, E, and F as shown. Where are the characters? What are they doing? Just give us more information as you build to G. F can be as simple as a toned down page before a page turn and reveal. A while ago, I was watching an interview with Todd McFarlane. He talked about how he likes to precede a really dramatic spread with a really dull, kind of toned down, boring spread. If he makes them, if he makes that kind of plain, then when you turn the page, pow, it makes it even more impactful. In contrast to Junji Ito, who tends to add a reaction panel right at the end of the page, you see how the character is reacting to whatever they've seen, and you're left to consider what is beyond the next page, and if you even want to go there. And potentially psych yourself out as you're about to turn that page. Once these decisions are made, I write a note on each page to help me decide the imagery that best portrays the things happening in this chapter. When I was working traditionally, I would write a sentence on each piece of paper. As they say, show don't tell. Thing is unnecessary, it's common knowledge, your reader's definitely gonna know, and will really take away from the story. Either say nothing and just show, like brushing your teeth, you don't have to explain brushing your teeth, you could just show toothpaste, or say I'm brushing my teeth, that's all you need. Everyone knows what that is. Hopefully. Sometimes you can rely on shorthand and the knowledge of the reader to help you along. As a visual person, I feel like we have a bit of an advantage over novel writers because we can visually show stuff instead of having to show it with words. This is easier with people from the same culture, which can be a challenge with manga because it's cross-cultural. And there are many, no matter how much you love Japan and have experienced it or studied it, unless you've lived there are details you're just not going to know. If you're writing a story about a Japanese high school, but you've never been, there's going to be a lot of detail and nuance that you're not going to know or understand to portray in your story. But if you're setting it in an American high school, as an American, there's a lot of little stuff you can put in there that someone foreign wouldn't know to add. But there are many things that we all know. Again, going back to brushing your teeth. That's hopefully international. Bottom line, manga is a visual medium. So use the imagery to your example. Remember, manga is a visual medium, so you want the art to do as much of the heavy lifting in the story as possible. Don't just rely on the text. If the writer and artist are separate, this may be something they want to discuss. I can see it being really tempting for the writer to put as much of their information in their writing as possible and have as large a footprint as possible. As an artist, I can tell you it's fairly important to leave room for your artist to translate some of this stuff into the visuals and give them some space to do so they can translate that for you. Okay, it's time to panel. For this, you'll need the highly technical and difficult to find printer paper. Gather 10 pages if you're doing a 20-page chapter and fold them in half. So now you have 20 pages. When I work digitally, I just set up the pages that I'm going to work on at the correct DPI size with all the margins and just do a rough draft layer in blue. It's scribbled, it's a mess, and then when I come back to do the inking, I just can use another layer. A single page can have as little as half a panel in the case of a spread, and as many as 9 panels like you might find in American comics. That's so much. This part really depends on personal preference, the genre, the type of story you're telling, and the pacing, and varying your panel sizes makes it more fun to read. For panels that you want to have impact or more importance, make them larger. Narrow panels can feel fast, and angle panels can feel more action. Play with them and create a dynamic flow across the spread. Next time you read a manga or graphic novel, pay attention to the panels. See how the writer is using them, or the artist is using them. See how they make you feel. Do you read faster, slower? Are you more enticed into looking at the artwork? Are you being shoved through the story to turn the page? Make a mental note of this and see if you can incorporate it in your own work. It's also fun to see how different artists approach their panels differently. Oda Sensei, for example, in One Piece generally seems to work in 3s. His page is divided into 3, and then the panels are smaller or larger within that format. And he always takes advantage of full page bleed. Hirano Sensei prefers his outer margin and works in long, thin panels of 2 to 4 rows. Kubo-sensei uses a lot of large panels, so many pages only have 2 rows. Clamp likes to use long panels, and so on and so forth. Look through your collection and see what you can find. Bottom line, you want your panels to be easy to follow in the reading direction. This is more important for the manuscript than the rough draft, but when you make your gutters, which is the space between the panels, the vertical gutters are going to be much narrower and the horizontal gutters are going to be wider. If you do them all the same size, weirdly, it makes it harder to read. And if you look at manga coming out of Japan, you will see the vertical gutters are narrow, the horizontal gutters are wide. It helps you go across and down. Manga is very similar to a storyboard and is kind of like a movie on paper. Like a movie, you'll have to decide on your camera shots, and the long shot will tell the reader who and what are in the scene and which way they're facing. Think of it as the establishing shot. The first panel or so should at least show where before we get into what, who, and how. Close-up is generally used to show the reader emotions. Try to vary the shots you use on a given page or spread. An entire story made up of medium shots or too many close shots will get really boring. Goodbye Eri by Tatsuki Fujimoto is an interesting one to look at, as he tries to use his manga as a camera in this. The entire thing is through the point of view of the camera on a cell phone. So it can be really interesting to look at that and see how he's tried to translate that. So using your shots, you want to try to pull the reader into your story. The distance between your subject and your camera affects how the audience feels about them. Your subject will appear the largest in a close-up shot and the smallest in a faraway shot or a long shot. Many professional manga tend to lean on long shots, as it's a great way to show a lot of what's going on and you can really show off those background skills. When you frame your shot or panel, you're not just drawing a thing, you're composing the image and forcing your reader to perceive it in a particular way, or at least trying to get them to. So some considerations when you're framing the shot are the relationships between the characters in the shot, if there are more than one, the size of the subject, the elements on the left and right of the subject, and balance or imbalance. Some examples of angles would be eye level, where the camera is the same height of the eyes of your characters, over the shoulder. If you see a panel that's over the shoulder, you might see the side of the head, ear, and shoulder from behind, and then whatever that character is seeing. Aerial is a great way to establish a shot where you're looking down like you're a bird. High angle is where you're looking down at your subject or character and can be kind of intimidating and diminutive and make them feel small. On the other hand, looking up from like a low angle or a worm's eye view, it can make the character feel larger, more powerful, more intimidating rather than being intimidated. A fun one you will often see in anime is a Dutch tilt, where the frame is tilted slightly to the side. I always think of Steins Gate for Dutch tilt. And sometimes if you're doing a creepy story, it's kind of fun to tilt things just very slightly. They don't look tilted, but it just feels off. As you make more manga, it can be fun to look into storyboarding and cinematography tricks and learn new things about what you can do with your different panels and frames to create your feeling, create your emotion, create your story. When I don't have a script, so with Saros, I left the dialogue until the very last moment when I had to do it, because writing is hard. I did that to give myself time to think about what was being said and really get a feel for the conversations as I was drawing. If you prefer to decide early, write it first or write it with your images. Really, it's like everything, personal preference. But the text should add to and enhance the artwork, not do the job for it, or not reiterate what's already being shown. If you read something like that, it's like, yeah, I can see what's happening, you don't have to tell me. It's frustrating as a reader and can be a waste of time and can really bog stuff down. So just cut that out of your script. See how much you can turn into the art. If I have a script, like with Scatheless, many of those decisions have been made for me, so I just need to decide how to divide up the script between the 20 pages. I look for page turns, scene changes, dramatic moments, and how much has been said in a particular scene. It doesn't always stay like that. Once I start drawing, I start getting a real feel for how much text is on each page. Does it fit? Who's saying what? How much room it takes? Sometimes I add an expression panel and it shoves the text over, or whatever's happening in the page needs to be alone in that spread. So I'll scoot some text over to the next page. My writer is very wordy. Sometimes it's a challenge to make sure there's enough room for the text. And if a lot is being said, sometimes that text needs to be spread out. And if there's not enough room in the panel, it has to be divided into multiple panels. Sometimes we do this afterwards when we go back and do adjustments and corrections. We'll spread out some bubbles because they're just this long wall of text and and it's too much. Over time, I realized when I draw, I need to leave space for the speech bubbles because I like to fill out a whole panel and add the speech bubbles later at the end. My writer over time has gotten used to my pacing and speed, which is kind of slow. She has adjusted her writing and pacing to that, which is kind of fun. Our first chapter ended up 10 pages longer than intended because there's so much content in it, and I like to spread things out and decompress everything. So last thoughts. There's so much to consider when you're approaching a name. I encourage you to take some time to work on it. It's a really important part of the process. If you get it right here, it'll make building on top of the rough draft easier. You can do multiple rough drafts, nothing wrong with that, to get it to where you want it, and then do your inking, your final. If you're ready to move on, check out this video where I don't know what I'm doing. If you're ready to move on, check out this video where I go over setting up your manuscript pages so you can use them for print and digital. Or this video where I go over Kisho Tenketsu to help you while you're setting up your chapter.